So, hello. Is this on?
Hello. Sorta.
Thank you so much for coming. Many of you might just have had lunch and feeling a little sluggish right now, but these two personalities will wake you up. Let me get out my cheat sheets here. Over there is Gabino Iglesias.
Oh, you nailed it.
And so, Gabino is the author of the Shirley Jackson and Bram Stoker award-winning novel, The Devil Takes You Home, as well as the author of the critically acclaimed award-winning novels, Zero Saints and Coyote Songs. He's a writer, journalist, professor, and literary critic living in Austin, Texas. He is the horror columnist for the New York Times Book Review. I'm probably familiar with the two awards. Shirley Jackson is most well known for her book, The Haunting of Hill House. She's a great writer. If you haven't read her, you really should. Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, which is also a good book. By the way, my name is Jonathan Bordas, and I'll be kind of fumbling around here leading this discussion. Anything I should add about your description?
I think that was more than enough.
Well, wait, there's more. He lives in Austin, Texas. He's originally from Puerto Rico. Did you speak English before you came to Texas?
I didn't speak a word of English until I was about 10 or 11, and then the school started English classes, and I was like, sign me up for that. The future is elsewhere, maybe, so better learn another language.
So, my friend here, Eli Cranor, I've known him for years. I think you sent me the manuscript for your first novel, and I gave you a lot of crap.
Only made it better.
That's right. His first novel was Don't Know Tough. What was his second novel?
Ozark Dog.
Ozark Dog. His third novel was just out in July. Yeah. Broiler. Why couldn't I? He's won Edgar Award. So we got these guys are coming in the trail of two very good horror writers or scary writers. I've got their two latest novels here. This is Eli's Broiler. Is that the cover that was on?
Yeah.
Because this is a proof, uncopied, advanced copy.
Lights, please.
Mike? Oh, I'm sorry. All right. I get this loud noise coming back to me, but percussive noise, so I thought I was talking too loud.
You're not.
Oh, okay. All right. This is Gabino's novel, this neon green and purple. Do you get to approve the covers?
We had some conversations on it, but I don't think approve is the word. you might get, they mimight listen to your opinion or not. You're free to send it, but no.
I will say for Broiler, the book that what they started off with was this it looked like a scene from like a northeastern like New England farm, and then they had put Broiler, and so I think they thought that was a chicken like house, I think they thought, they knew it wasn't a chicken plant, but so I told them, I was like, y'all, like, if this book gets published and comes out in Arkansas and y'all are trying to claim this is a chicken house, like this pasture idyllic scene, so they ended up just going with a feather. Yeah.
So, if you're wondering what the connection is here, they're friends. But the connection between the two books is, Gabino's book is about more or less a group of 5 guys who one of the guys is named Bimbo, and he's named for a like cake-like product.
So back home we have these little cookies named Bimbo cookies, and the character that shows up on the package is this little brown chubby bear, and that's what my friend, he was the original before the book came along. That's what he looked like, so that's what we called him. And when I moved to the States, I was like, oh, a bimbo is something different here. But you know, you don't change names after like 20 years, so that one stuck.
The characters in Gabino's books are just, I mean, I was not familiar with, it takes place in Puerto Rico, and I was not familiar at all with Puerto Rico. But they're all, the group of 5 guys who go on this mission are definite individuals with their own personalities and their own quirks, their own characteristics. Fascinating guys. But the connection, if there is a connection, and I might be stretching this a little bit, is Gabino's book is about the disenfranchised in Puerto Rico. People who are very poor, who they have nothing, more or less, and they have to take care of problems themselves. These are very young people, what, high school age, maybe just out of college, just out of high school. And Eli's book, Broiler, is about the chicken growers, also disenfranchised, also Hispanic, and how they attempt, or at least one man attempts to take care of his problems. And so, I didn't know that until I read the books, and I thought, oh, okay, I see there is a maybe tenuous line between these 2 books. Is that fair, do you think? So you just mentioned that you based this, or you started writing this because you had friends like this, Gabino? In class, what we would call the inciting incident in the book actually happened to us. One of my friend's mom was working the door at a club, checking IDs, and there was a drive-by, and she took 2 bullets to the face and dropped dead right there on the sidewalk. And obviously we grew up with Tarantino movies and watching, Casino and Goodfellas. So obviously we were going to avenge her death. We didn't. There's levels to badassery, and then we were like right there, but people who do drive-bys they're a different breed. So we never did, but I started writing the novel in my head right after, because I wanted to give us an opportunity to make things right, and that never happened. But then, fiction lets you do things that you can't do in real life, so I took that, and I'm not sure they pull it off perfectly, but they get a better outcome that we did. So. And you made it's kind of a melange of it's everything that you might think of. First, these guys go on a revenge, and they get into trouble with the main drug boss on the island, and then a hurricane. And so Gabino is classified as a horror writer, I guess. Neither one of you fit any kind of niche that I know of, but that's the closest I can. And correct me if I make any impressions, the wrong impression. But during the storm is when the supernatural, the horror, occurs. Is that right?
Yeah.
There are mentions of it throughout. The West African religious influences that have, what's the phrase? Syncretism? Is that how you say it?
Syncretism, yeah.
It has become part of the Catholic religion in the Caribbean, I would say, and in Mexico and the countries in Latin America. The strange to people like me, gods and weird things from Africa they're just as powerful as every other figure in standard Catholicism. Is that what?
Yeah, no, Puerto Ricans, original Puerto Ricans, if there's such a thing, were Arahuaca Indians. They were the Taino Indians, and then 1492, the Spaniards came in, decimated the Indians, and started mixing with those who were left, and then they said, it's too hot, let's go to Africa, steal some people, and bring them over so they can build a country for us. So modern Puerto Ricans are like 33% Arahuaca Indians, and 33% Spaniards, and 33% Africans. The thing with the Africans were they brought their entire food, music, culture, and gods, and the Spaniards said, no, this is our religion. And they said, all right, we're not going to pick a fight. What we're going to do is we're going to take your saints, and we're going to sort of like dress our gods to look like your saints. So when you come in, you'll see us praying to them, but we're really not doing any of that. We're keeping our own stuff, and that just grew. It's the roots of the country. So you live on a street, and then you have your Jewish folks, and then Rastafarians that came in from Jamaica, and then Voodoo and Santeria, Mesa Blanca, Palo Mayombe, and then like every house has like a different thing. And Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, they all have that wild mix.
So that's syncretism, right? Where the two things mesh. So Eli, you're pretty brave taking on the chicken industry.
It's got security out there.
Yeah. Well, in this book, I do this thing for the Buzz, 103.7 The Buzz, where I reference, like I give a book a week, which is, thank you all for all being here with the Razorback game, football game going on right in this moment, but that crowd is not the best crowd to recommend books to. And in the months leading up to Broiler coming out, we hired a new basketball coach, Coach Calipari, and the way we got him was through a significant donation from a very prominent chicken processing company, a chicken. And anyway, yes, John, I've been, but all my books have kind of had. I think every book you write, at least for me, it scares me in some way, like. There's pieces of me that are in here that are exposed and that are out for the world's consumption, and you get to say, this is fiction, this is a work of fiction. So yeah, but luckily, no big issues so far.
Really?
Yeah.
Yet.
Till today.
So, well, let me just ask you this question. Do you get hate mail?
I do. What I actually get the most hate mail from is from my weekly column with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, which is so strange. I guess there's just more of that. It comes out every week. But yeah, I get all sorts of stuff for things I would have never thought would have offended anyone or upset somebody, or you just get, and it's not horrible. What about you? What do you get? I know you do it.
I collect hate mail. This is a fantastic country. That's why I chose to stay. But there are certain groups of people that don't like brown folks. Some of them read, surprisingly, and I guess they haven't discovered football yet. No, there's a group that gets bothered by that. There's another group that hates the LGBTQ community. I have a lot of LGBTQ family and friends, so most of the folks in my books are black and brown, and some of them are gay, and people don't like that. And so they write angry notes about, I don't have a mother and I need Jesus in my life. I got enough gods as it is. I don't. What I do is I collect those, and then right before I start a new book, I go back and I read whatever pissed people off the most, and then I take those elements and I go harder.
Yeah, one of the guys in this group who were on the is that fair to say, the revenge? I mean, definitely they're on revenge. But what do you call the book Revenge book? But before, let me just describe this guy as he's gay. He's a gay surfer, right? But he's accepted by the other guys in the group and seemingly by the other people surrounding them. But so back to the revenge notion.
I'm a sucker for revenge stories. I don't know. My mom was a very good woman. She's still alive. She's a very good woman. She went to my reading in Gainesville last week because I have a sister that lives in Florida, and she tried her hardest to teach me how to turn the other cheek, and I couldn't. And I think my dad had something to do with that. My mom would say, like, if you get hit, you turn the other cheek, and my dad thought, like, if you get hit, knock their teeth down the throat. And I kind of liked his approach better. And mamas are sacred. So in this book, it was, everybody's on the same boat. You mess with someone's mom that way, I think it was S.A. Cosby last time I saw him. He said, some motherfuckers just need killing. I share that with Sean, and we do a lot of that, and Eli does too in his book. So, revenge is fun, especially when it's fictional.
What about you? What about you? Get hate mail? I mean, but you talked about it with the newspaper.
Oh, with the books. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of. It's strange. It varies. It's not so specific. I get here's the strangest thing I get is I will get people who have the names of the characters in my books, and they will email me from Ohio and say, "Hey, my name is blah blah. What gave you the right to steal my name?" And I just don't respond. I mean, do you respond to your stuff? No, I don't ever respond. No. And,
what are you going to say? Thank you for your dollar?
Yeah. Thank you for your name that, person I don't know in Ohio.
I won't put you in the next one.
Yeah. But that's really it.
So what were you just sitting around thinking one day about the poetry industry, or did you, what was the genesis?
Yeah, I think so. This is the weird thing about Don't Know Tough, Ozark Dogs, and Broiler, is all three of those books were drafted. I had drafts. They weren't completed manuscripts in terms of like ready to be published, but I had them written all prior to Don't Know Tough coming out in 2022. So these were like early books for me. They were books that I had written before I had an agent or an editor or anybody else, telling me what to write, what not to write. And one of the things that I really tapped into was Arkansas. I knew that I wanted, having lived in other places, having lived in South Florida, having lived in Sweden, man, I'll never forget I played football down in Boca Raton, and people asking me, like, is Arkansas a state? Like what? And then when they figure, oh yeah, okay, it's a state. Like, do y'all wear shoes? And like all these questions they would ask about Arkansas. So I just knew I wanted to write about Arkansas, and so the way the story Broiler came to me was I knew enough about like chicken houses and stuff just from growing up. Like, I'll never forget driving around the state, driving up in the hills, up past north of where I live in Russellville, and you'd get that smell. You all know that smell if you're from Arkansas. And I would be with my grandfather, Poppy, and I'd say, "Damn, Pop, that smells like shit." Like what? And he would say, "No, it smells like money." And so there was one side of this book. And then where the other side, and where I decided I wanted to tackle it with the story, was I was teaching high school. Gabino and I have been in the past public school teachers. He in Texas, me in Arkansas, yeah. And I was teaching ALE. And so long story short, I had students who would come in, put their heads down, go to sleep, and there was just like no getting them up. And it took me a few days to finally get enough talking to them and figure out that they were working 10, 12-hour night shifts at a local chicken plant. And I was writing then, but like I said, I didn't have a book published. I didn't have anything. So I started asking them questions, and they start telling me about how it's really cold. And they start telling me about, so they wear hoodies and jeans and all these clothes, and then they wear these ponchos. I'm like, well, what's the ponchos for? And they're like, well, it's for the blood and the guts, but it's also for antibacterial spray, that there's coat and everything. And I'll never forget, I had this one male student, and he was kind of prideful of this. You know, he was proud of this, what his job, because he got to have a knife. And his knife, he had chainmail glove, and he would cut like the left hind leg, and he kept saying this word off the broilers, broilers, broilers. And that was a term that I wasn't completely familiar with. But boy, when he said that, I thought, that sounds like a thriller. You know, like that sound like broiler, like it has this perfect, and so, yeah, it has, and so I didn't jump into writing it. It took some time for me because I didn't want to write an expose. And like Alice Driver, who is here, she's written a beautiful, deep diving book into the life of, you know, these workers. But I wanted to write a story. I'm a novelist, you know. I wanted to. So it took me doing some living on the family side of stuff to figure out, because this book is really about, you know, it's really about motherhood, which is another strange thing for me, you know. That was where I saw this going. So motherhood and the chicken processing industry.
I can see how they fit together. Gabino, so I haven't read your other books, I'm sorry, but do they take place in Puerto Rico too?
No, this is the first one.
So you published, this is your fourth novel, right?
Fifth.
Fifth, okay. And this is your third published novel. I think you probably have 4 or stored away somewhere, ready to go.
They need to be burned. Those early ones they never see the light of day.
Well, that's what you said about the chicken book, but you turned it into something else. So where was I going with this?
Gabino's written 5. I've written 3.
Oh, yeah. And Eli has a Wikipedia page. You're going to have to work on that, man.
No, I need an Edgar. That's what I need. Yeah.
But on the Wikipedia page for Eli, it says that he was a professional football player. Does anybody know where he played professional football? Yeah, exactly right. He played for Sweden, or what was that? There was a town in Sweden or a team?
Karlstad, Sweden, yeah.
Karlstad, Sweden.
Karlstad Crusaders.
Yeah. And he was a quarterback, too. So he's the only quarterback Swedish football novelist that I've ever heard.
Who's into chickens?
And motherhood.
Motherhood, yes. So I know I keep dwelling on this a lot, but when you wrote your first novel, you know, I was really concerned about how your community was going to accept it. Do you remember that? I kept saying,
Yeah. John had me scared like to death.
that wasn't what I was intended, because his first novel was Don't Know Tough. Takes place in a town. It's not Russellville where he lives, but it's a smaller town, but it has teachers. He's a teacher, has a principal. He's worked for principals, and they're not very good people. In fact, they're bad people. And there's a lot of things about a small town that a boy from that small town probably shouldn't write in public. And so I was really worried about that. And I told him, I said, you know, okay, you're going to go with... He was determined, despite my unfounded caution. He was determined to do it. And But your reception was okay, right?
So here's the whole story. This goes all the way back to our genesis. Is I wrote the first chapter of Don't Know Tough. I was teaching at Morrilton and coaching high school football, teaching 10th and 11th grade English. And I had this prep period that tied into a lunch break. So I had like an hour and a half. All the other teachers hated me because I wouldn't go to the lounge. And I would spend that hour and a half writing. And I wrote that Still Feel the Burn on My Neck, told Coach it was a ringworm, like this. It was like, and I wrote this whole first chapter, which ended up being a short story. And what possessed me to do what I do next, I have no idea. But what I thought was, Charles Portis lives just an hour from me. I'm going to find his home address, and I'm going to print this story out, and I'm going to mail it to Charles Portis. And I did. And I put it in a manila envelope, and I sent it off. And like a month later, and I really thought, we do, like when you're scraping and clawing, like trying to find somebody in the world of the literary stuff, like you never know. You send stuff off like that, you don't hear anything back 99% of the time. But a month later, here comes another manila envelope. And it's got not only the story with the signature from Charles Portis, but it's got this beautifully sincere typed letter from this man who has read the story out loud twice to Charles, and then they offered in conjunction like their thoughts on what could be done and what could be done better. And so that is now printed, or that is now framed above my desk. It stayed with me. But what John was saying was, like I said, every book scares me. They all have like some sort of, but I think that's the point. Like that's why I thought it was worthy of a story. Like there's things that I see every day and things that I think, man, I would like to try and change this in some way. It's no different from Broiler. Like I love Arkansas. We've moved back to Arkansas. We've lived here. We're not going anywhere. But there's definitely a lot of stuff with my home state that I want to see done better. So all three of my books take swings at those things. And I'll never forget the opening night of John actually came we have a bookstore in Russellville called Dog Ear Books, and they did this big, nice kickoff launch event. We had tons of people, mostly family and friends. My wife is there as well. And a lot of little ladies from my mom's Sunday school class. And it's exactly what John was saying. Like, this is what I felt like. They're like, Eli, we're so proud of you. And I'm signing this book and I push it, and I'm like, I hope you like it, But long story short, to answer John's question is, no, I really think it's twofold. I think one, most people are just excited, like small town boy does good, there's a whole part of that they're just excited. And then it kind of counters what you were saying earlier, that I think most of the people that would have a problem with my books probably don't read. So they're probably not coming, that hard at me.
But you said the Baptist preacher was okay with it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, Gabino, how did you first start writing? When did it occur to you? Were you reading a book or a story and thinking, hey, I can do this? Or
It was two things that happened at once. I was not a good student. Surprise! And my teachers used to just get rid of me, just send me to the library. Shout out to librarians. Anywhere you go in the world, find the people messing with the librarians. Those are the bad guys. So she would just tell me, don't burn the place down. Just find something to read. And so I was 9, 10. And I found Horacio Quiroga was a Latin American author who wrote really creepy, horrific short stories. And I was like, this is like a way of making a living. You can do this. And soon after that, I started taking English classes. At the end of that year, the teacher said, y'all have to produce a short story so I can read it and see how your verbs are doing. And, I turned it in and I wrote a story. About a lady in my neighborhood who had a monster baby. And she lugged the baby in the basement. That tells you that that's fiction because Puerto Rican houses don't have basements. But I used to see basements in movies, and it seemed cool and creepy. So the baby never stops growing. So in a couple months, the baby's a monster. He breaks out of the basement and just basically murders the entire neighborhood. I was maybe 10, 11. I didn't know you're supposed to change names. I learned that from a lawyer later in life. But the school was concerned, and they called my parents. And it was the first and only time in my life where my dad said, I got this one. And he went to the school, and we sat there, and the lady did her thing. And I was like, my dad's going to whoop my ass. And once she finishes, my dad looks at her and says, I see your point, but tell me this. Was the story well written? And the lady said yes. And he's like, all right. And then we stood up and left. And I was like, I can kill people. I can get away with whatever I want as long as it's well written. This is exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. And obviously it took like 25 years to figure out how exactly to do that. It worked out in the end, so.
So what, I mean, I know when you went to Washita Baptist that you had a professor there, Dr. Johnny Wink, who was and still is kind of your mentor. But surely, I mean, you had an interest in writing before that, right?
Yeah, my come up story was that I was becoming like a jock. You know, like by about fourth grade, I mean, I was playing basketball, football, baseball, like so much. And both my parents were teachers. Dad was a counselor. Mom was a kindergarten teacher. In elementary schools, Dad was a counselor. And I'll never forget, it was the summer before fifth grade. He walks into my bedroom, like first day of summer, and I'm ready to like go. We lived in a neighborhood, go hit my bike and just, you know, go out. And he slams down on my desk one of those black and white marbled composition notebooks, you know? And then he says, son, you're not coming out of this room until you've read 20 pages of whatever book you want, and then written one handwritten page in this notebook. He said, you can write about what you read, you can write about whatever you're, like a diary, a journal. And so lo and behold, I start doing that, and every one of those journal entries starts with, this is the worst day ever because I have to write in this stupid journal. And he made me do that all the way until, I think, ninth grade. So like 3 or 4 summers straight. And then what happened was, by the time I made it to high school, just like if you're the kid who's being forced to dribble a bunch of basketballs or shoot a bunch of free throws or kick a bunch of soccer goals, like by the time I got to that age, I was good at it. You know, like I had practiced all that extra time in the summer. And so, of course, just like the kid who's the fastest kid in 5th grade, what does the fastest kid like to do? He likes to run, you know. And if you're good at reading and writing, I love to read and write. But it wasn't really until I took an intro to creative writing class with Johnny Wink and this is a guy who to this day, he's in his 51st year teaching at Washita Baptist. He just turned 80 on September 8th, and I call him every Tuesday and read him a little piece, you know, of whatever I'm working on. And just kind of, he's just kind of the North Star. And it was that sort of love of literature that was just oozing out of him and love of creative writing that I was like, for me, it was like, I just want to be that guy. Like, I want to be him. Like, whatever that looks like, I want to be like him.
So to show you how much he appreciates Dr. Johnny Wink, he named one of the bad guys in this current play.
I did.
So y'all have to forgive me, because this is what I'm interested in. Do you use a word compressor or do you, processor, or to write, or do you start out longhand, or how does it begin?
When I moved here in 2008 to Austin, I realized I had to switch languages if I wanted to have a career as a writer. And someone got me a pirate version of Windows 98. And I started writing in Word, and now I go to fancy conferences where everybody's discussing Scrivener and all this other stuff, and I'm like, don't move me away from Word. I've always, and then when phones came along, it was great because now I can, if I'm waiting online to get food or at the bank or getting gas and get an idea, I can open my notes and just do that. Never used anybody else. I've tried doing notes in handwriting. This is more your expertise, but my chicken scratch, I'll have a decent idea and the next day it sounds like potatoes and I can't make sense of what I wrote. So it's been Word for every novel ever. And I don't use anything else. If you want to write, you don't need a fancy program. You need to sit down and write it, and that's it, whichever form works for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I read. I've forgotten his name. Who wrote Lucky Jim?
Ainsley?
Yes.
Kingsley Amos.
Amos, yes, right, Kingsley Amos. Somebody asked him, what's your writing process? And he said, well, ma'am, I attached the seat of my pants to the seat of that chair. But do you write for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a day? What's your...
I wish. No, I always had 2 to 3 jobs. So it was always like maybe 15 minutes per day. The first 30,000 words of The Devil Takes You Home I wrote. I did go to the lounge room because I was a floater. I was teaching 4 different classes to high school students, and I didn't have a room. So I had 35 minutes for lunch, so I typed 30,000 words with my right hand because I was eating a sandwich with the left. And then I thought, when things worked out and I became a full-time writer, even though I was teaching online and stuff, I thought, now I have time. I'm going to do that. And life was like, no, you don't. You're going to be spending more time on the road. I have an 11-year-old. I'm the one who cooks. I do laundry. I have to write my column for the New York Times. I have to read the books to write that column for the New York Times. So it's usually at some point now, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., I will shut down the world to try to get maybe 2 hours in on a regular day. I've been on the road since the 20th of this month. Maybe I've written 500 words at the hotel because it's not there. You're not home. You don't have your music. You don't have your stuff. You're just airport, Uber, hotel, event, Uber, airport, go to another hotel. So I wish I had that, I could wake up every day and write for 4 hours. I don't know if it'd be useful for me because I'm a mood writer. Sometimes I sit there and it's just not there. Everything sucks, so I shut the computer and then go walk the dog. Yeah.
You've written a lot about your writing process in your column. Maybe people here haven't read it. Do you want to describe it a little bit? Because you have it seems to me like a strict regimen for you.
Yeah, I think it comes from like my background in athletics. You know, I don't know, maybe that, or maybe it's just me. But what I do is I have 2 kids, 7 and 5. And if you've heard me say this, I'm sorry, but I think it's worth repeating because I get up at 5. That's like about 2 hours before they get up, and that gives me 2 hours to write. And I do write on a yellow legal pad, but it has no lines on it. And so much to my wife's, my wife hates these yellow legal pads because we have to special order them, and they're not cheap. But it's something Ray Bradbury wrote one time about, I think it's the epigraph of Fahrenheit 451, where it says if they give you lined paper, turn it sideways and write against the lines. Yeah, you can't be bound by the conventions of even lined paper, So I took it a step farther, and I don't have any lines. But for me, the writing, it kind of goes weird, and it allows me. But the reason is the pad is because just kind of like what you were saying about shut down the world. It's a way for me to completely unplug. If I'm ever writing on a computer, the temptation to go Google something, and then that one Google search leads to I end up at Gabino's page. I'm like, what? How'd I get here? And I've lost like 20 minutes of writing, So I just write for those 2 hours. And that really is like, that's about it, in terms of like my creative output for that day. But what I end up getting is about 5 or 6 handwritten pages, which is about 1,000 words, maybe, right? About 1,000. And then throughout the rest of the day, I type that into a Word doc. And just add it, like it'll add to the pages. And then when my kiddos go to bed at night, I go back down to the office, and this is the real secret sauce. I call my mom. So I said that I call Johnny Wink on Tuesdays. Well, I call Mom every night that I'm drafting something, and I read her what I've written. And that really helps to hear it aloud. It helps me to get the voices right in my head. But here's why it really, really works. It's because Mom never says, I think that character should probably do this. Or I think maybe this. She never gives any sort of critique, commentary, nothing. This is all she ever says. Eli, honey, that was the best thing I've ever heard, you've ever written. That was it. And I hang the phone up. I say, thanks, Mom. I hang the phone up, and I'm just like, and when the alarm goes off at 5, I'm rip snorting and ready to go. Thanks, Mom.
When I met Eli, he told me that story, and I tried it the next day, and when I was done reading, my mom said, "Did you forget I don't speak English?" And that was the last time I did that.
So, one more question about this process. I know I really should be talking about the books, but you really need to read the books. If I can put a plug in just for the books. But how did you get an agent?
So the first time, because I know sometimes aspiring writers watch this stuff, I wasted 2 years of my life between 2008 and 2010 just collecting about 400 rejections. And then 2 years after that, I read that novel, and I was like, of course I was getting rejected. It sucks. I discovered that in the United States of America, there are amazing, amazing publishers that are indie, and you don't have to have an agent. So I did four books without an agent. And then the last two kind of took off, and they were nominated for Stoker's and Locus Awards, and one of them was a conversation where we ate. One of them was picked up by a producer in LA, and it was optioned. And then when I was almost ready again, an agent contacted me, and she said, I read Coyote songs while I was going through postpartum depression, and and I said, if I still like the book when I'm done with my postpartum depression, I'll reach out to this guy. And I said, I'm finishing another one. When it's done, I'll send it your way. And that second part was sent her the book, and she's, I love it. Let's work together. So, but yeah, collected about 400 rejections, and then got an agent that basically fell in my lap.
And I think after 400 rejections, I think after like 200, I would have gone, screw this, I'm done with this. I'm gonna sell insurance, which he did.
I think the 400 rejections were less soul-sucking than 1 week selling insurance on the phone. So I was like...
How did you find an agent?
Well, this is I had, and anybody who's out there wanting to do this, like I want y'all to hear, like 400 rejections. Mine was Don't Know Tough was rejected over 200 times. But I want to take this back to a night in Oxford, Mississippi. Gabino was in that journey where he was with this indie, and I was a guy who couldn't get an agent to save my life. I'd written Don't Know Tough, and we were both at a bar in Oxford, Mississippi, talking about, this is where I first met Gabino. You were there for like a book conference. I mean, you were there for the Oxford conference of the book. But we were both talking about like how we couldn't get an agent, or like who we had feelers out with, who was responding to this. And so that's just a side note to say I think this is really cool. Like that
Worked out, homie.
Yeah,
It worked out.
And thanks for coming. But for me, it was those 200 rejections, and then the one thing that really worked for me, and I'm a weird duck. Like, and I say I'm a weird duck because my first book came out in 2022. So that's 2022, 2023, 2024. In that time, I have had 4 literary agents. So I don't know if that says something about me, or maybe it's just my revenge at agents in general for not ever taking me on, in the beginning. But the one thing I will say is, while I was querying, a lot of young writers that I talked to, they shut everything down and they do this query. And they're waiting, they're sending off these letters, they're waiting. For me, the only way, and I think, again, this came from my football background, where it's like if you lose on Friday night, you get ready on Saturday and Sunday for the next week's game. I just kept writing. Like, as soon as I'd finished one book, and that was that window of time that I wrote those first 3 books. So when some of them finally did come along, I had like this catalog, and I kind of had bought myself this time where I can put, books out without having to rush to try and get, something else out. But yeah, the way I ended up getting it was my publisher, they hosted a first crime novel contest, which you did not have to have an agent for. And so I got to send it in. And I think this is why also I've had such trouble with agents, is because it was my publisher, my editor, who dug me out of 500 other manuscripts after 200 of these industry professionals had said, it's not quite what we're looking for. So I put all my faith in my publisher, my editor, and those people. And then they were like, okay, well, you have a contract now. And now do you want to go find an agent? And so then agents were coming to me like, oh, we'd love some of the same ones who had already turned the book down wanted to represent me. So
you're doing great. Can I get 15% of that?
Yeah, this looks great. Now I get my 15%.
Yeah, that seems backwards. I mean, it is backwards. Yeah. Usually you don't have a publisher unless you have an agent. Yeah. But so anyway, we've got a little time left. Anybody have any questions for the 2 gentlemen here? 2 very interesting gentlemen. Yes, please.
So I'm halfway through Gabino's book,
And your headgear matches the book, right? Oh, hey, awesome. Love it.
So, and I just noticed, because I'm reading it on Kindle right now, and I just got this, and I noticed in the book sleeve, one of my favorite lines that I highlighted in the Kindle was, we are surrounded by ghosts. Yeah. Gabe's grandmother says that. So I wanted to know what part of your writing, not just this book in general, does mysticism, ghosts, spirits play a part for you? And do you think it's important for your writing?
So my grandma had a very small apartment with 2 bathrooms. One bathroom was in the master bedroom. You would think that was for her. That was the bathroom that everybody used, because there was a small bathroom, like a half bathroom, in the middle of the hallway. But she kept all of her religious stuff in there, the candles and the saints and the little statues and all of that. And you weren't supposed to use that bathroom. It was for the saints, for the spirits. If we were walking and we passed the cemetery, it was like, shut up and start praying. Because if you walk by a cemetery and you're not praying, one of the ghosts might attach itself to you. If you watch a car accident, you start praying in case somebody dies. They don't want to use your body for revenge or whatever. So it was like, for her, ghosts and spirits and the ancestors, they were always absolutely everywhere. So as a kid, you grow up with that. It's normal. And then you realize that some other people don't have it that way. So when I started writing in English, I was like, I can put away, for a while, for 3 books or so, I put away Spanish as a language, and I tried to write 100% in English. I wasn't entirely happy with that, because sometimes the characters came to me and started talking in Spanish. But I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to lose the we're constantly surrounded by forces that we don't understand, and it doesn't matter who you pray to. I think most of the individuals that I've met in my life, you get to a point where it's like, I tried this and it didn't work. I tried this and it didn't work. What am I going to do now? And then people go, God, it's me again. And so, a version of that. And then we have that world. We're always talking about whatever comes after death or what's behind the veil. And to me, because I've seen it so much, it just belongs in those books. Just like people of color. It's like, why do you write so many people of color? I'm like, look around. We're here. Just like queer folks, we're here. So it was about not letting that go. She's gone, but it's still the spirit world. So I know that she'd be happy. She is happy to see that I keep that going. Every story is a ghost story. And my kid asked me about that line once, and I said, everyone that came before us is dead, and everyone you know right now, including me and your mom, that's the kind of parent that I am. Everyone you know who's older than you will probably pass on. But, we're still around. Just like my grandma is still around. When your abuelita dies, she's going to stick around. And he kind of liked that. Like, all right, so we don't just vanish. Like, it's all about ghost stories. So that's what I do, tell ghost stories.
So I have a question for each of you. So Eli, how many books do you have kind of sitting there waiting to be published next? And could you tell us about one of them? And then Gabino, I would like to know what hate mail recently is inspiring your next book.
Well, I had this quote, another Ray Bradbury quote. I loved Ray Bradbury. And there was a quote that said, you're not a real writer until you've written 1,000,000 words. And I don't generally love things that are so prescriptive, but I really took that to heart and was treating all my early writing as like an apprenticeship. Like, this was me learning to write well, for about 1,000,000 words. So I wrote about over 100 short stories, and I wrote like 3 manuscripts that were just garbage. Like, one was called American Football, and it was about this guy in Sweden, playing quarterback, and that, if anybody ever finds that book, I really just need to get rid of it all. But then there's been books between books, that didn't work or that didn't. But I do have a book that's coming out August of 2025, and it is called Mississippi Blue 42. And it is a very big, it's the thing I've been working on since 2022. So it's the thing, I've been revising these books and editing, and getting them ready, but this is the one thing I've been drafting. And it's a deep dive, almost like a satirical, like if you read Carl Hyacin, how he can take, something that's right out of the news lines but it's about big money college football. So set at a fictional university in Mississippi with a rookie federal agent from Arkansas. And so, Mississippi Blue 42, right in time for football season next year. Yeah.
And if he survives the chicken people, it's the football money people that are trying to come get him. June of last year, I went to Pittsburgh for the Stokers. I went for the Stokers. I packed light. I was not expecting to win, and then I won. And then it was like, as I sat in the airport the next day, I opened up Wikipedia, and I realized I was the first Latino to win since 1986 when, it was created and given to Stephen King. And thank you. And then it was awesome. I was on cloud 9. And then Monday morning, it was back to business. So let me check my email. And I had maybe 100 emails from different stuff. And there was half a dozen emails from angry white dudes telling me, you only won because the woke crowd voted, and you only won because of this and that. And I said, I could delete all of this. I could tell them to go after themselves. Or I could write the next one, try to get another one so I can tell them on stage. So that's the thing that's driving the next one. Yeah.
Hey, Gabino, I have a question for you. Sure. We're in a place where there are creatures in tunnels. There are creatures that live out in the water. Are there real stories about creatures living in tunnels, like in The Devil Takes You Home, or out in the reef in Puerto Rico?
There's in Texas, I'd heard I met a man who sadly passed away from a very weird disease that I can't remember the name. His name was Isaac Kirkman, and he worked for the cartels. If I mention a Mexican cartel, obviously 99.9% of people are going to imagine Mexican cartel members. Well, it turns out that they can't move as freely as they want in this country, and some of these cartel members are very deep brown, and they have tattooed faces. So in order to go places and buy guns, they're not very welcome. So they have normal-looking white folks who work for them on this side. And Isaac and his brother did that for a while till his brother got killed. And then Isaac decided to turn his life around, and by the end of his life, he was doing water drops along the border to help people who were crossing. And he'd been down there. He knew the tunnels. And during one of those conversations, he was like, I'm sure that I've seen stuff down there that is not human. And I took that to heart. He passed away before this book was out, but I do thank him in the book. He is a character in Zero Saints, the visionary guys, Isaac. And in Puerto Rico, it was, I grew up reading, Stephen King and Richard Lehman and Edgar Allan Poe, and I read a lot of Lovecraft. Back then, I had no clue that he was problematic and anti-Semitic, and I didn't know what he'd named his cat. With years, I was like, this is such a core part of horror's DNA. We can't just let it go because he was problematic. What we can do is take it back and make it as Jewish and queer and black and brown as possible. So I took some Lovecraft elements and I said there's no reason whatsoever why this couldn't fit in the Caribbean, where it's all ocean and reefs. So I use that. And if he's rolling in his grave, come get me, HP. I don't care. Yeah.
Liza, are we out of time?
I'll take one more question.
One more? Anybody?
I've got a question for you, Gabino. You just mentioned Stephen King, and this book draws all this Stand By Me comparisons, like in the body and that novella, and that for me, I was a late Stephen King person, and the first thing I ever read of Stephen King was when I was a parent. I read Pet Sematary. Oh my, I mean, but then I came across different seasons and The Body and Shawshank Redemption, all these in this one. And so I don't know, I just maybe with you being the New York Times columnist on horror and mentioning Stephen King and the comparisons for that and this, do you got anything on Stephen King or how that was an influence, or if it was at all, for this?
There's a wonderful thing happening right now for people like you and me who's got, we got kids. Now you can read like about haunted crayons, and then they grow up a little bit, and you move them to like Goosebumps and middle grade horror, and then they turn 13, and you split them like the lower half of horror YA. Back in the day, we went from The Given Tree, which is a horror story, by the way. That'll mess you up. And you went from that book to It. There was no middle ground, and parents did not care. So I think there's an entire set of generations that we grew up. Stephen King's been around forever. Different Seasons has, like 4 movies made out of it? Yeah. So if you weren't reading him, you were watching the movies, you were watching Cujo and all that stuff. There's a new version of Salem's Lot that just came out, so he's just there. He's horror for a lot of people. So when I was growing up, that's what was around. That was the thing that reached across the pond. So he was a hugely influential for me, along with Richard Lehman and whoever at that point had paperbacks, cheap paperbacks. If it wasn't that, I couldn't get it. So that was mostly what I read, and it sticks with you. So one day I'll get a blurb, hopefully. I don't know. Knock on wood. I don't know.
So thanks, everybody, for
Thank
coming
you.
out.
Thanks,
Thank you, sir.
You can be signing it.
Come on, Bram.
Yeah. Eliza, will we be out there signing?
So, yeah, if you want to get a book signed or buy